maybe not. I'm Cindy Claycomb. I'm the city council member for District 6. And joining me is my husband. We've discovered if we aren't on the same screen, we get feedback and all that. So he jumps in here with me. Charlie, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm on the Old Town Board here, and I've been on District Advisory Board 6 for 8 years, a number of years ago.
Yeah. So thank you. Anna, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Claycomb. My name is Ana Lopez. I am the Community Service Representative for District 6, and I also manage the Evergreen Neighborhood Resource Center up north on around the 27th in our Kansas area, and I'm a Delano resident.
If you need anything in District 6, you can always contact Anna. She can get you connected to the right folks at the city. How about our guest from Arizona? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Pat Greenway. I lived in Wichita for about 36 years before moving on to Scottsdale. I own a home that I rent out, and I am also the retired CEO of the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Kansas.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Pam, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Pam Allen. I'm in the Civic Engagement Academy, and I wanted to join this because I have a family member who lives in Greenway Manor. I wanted to see if there were any updates on when that might be getting remodeled. It's been on the promise list for a couple years now. So
yeah, good. Sally will be able to answer all those questions. Hi, Ariel. You want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel, and I am the Executive Director of Empower Evergreen, a newly formed nonprofit that is housed in the Evergreen Community Center, and here for 6 weeks now. So doing some awesome work and excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Ariel. Good morning, Walt. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Left the room.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll give Walt a little bit of chance to work with his microphone. Hi, Rick. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Rick Chauvin. I'm a board member that does advocacy for Black Bloc Wichita.
And you're also in the Civic Engagement Academy this session?
That's correct. Yeah.
Good deal.
Also, I'd just like to give you a shout out for recommending and giving some information about Black Bloc Wichita in your newsletter this week. That was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a great organization, and we like to have that partnership. Lonnie, you want to introduce yourself?
Morning. I'm a guest out of District 1st, but I like to keep a track of all 6 districts. And I'm pleased to see Council Member Sorello here and his outreaches to the different districts also.
All right. Thanks, Lonnie. Good morning, Claire. You want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Excuse me, I haven't spoken much yet today. Claire Willenberg with North Riverside, and I'm also on the Historic Preservation Board, being Cindy's representative there.
Thank you, Claire, for representing us there. And I see that Marcia has joined us. Marcia, you want to introduce yourself? Okay, well, sometimes those microphones are hard to get off, so we'll move on. And like I said, a few more people might join us. I find that during the first few minutes, people jump on and off. So we have 2 guests today that I am pleased to have with us. Sally Stank, who's our Director of Housing and Community Services, and she's going to actually talk to us about our housing projects and community services projects in just a few minutes. So I will hold off on that introduction. And then we have Council Member Jared Cirillo with us today, and we invited him to come and meet all of you And so I'm going to turn it over to Jared for a couple minutes to kind of give a little bit about his background and why he's with us. So Jared, the floor is yours.
Okay, Councilmember Claycomb, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself to some of your constituents, and I'm pleased to be here. As many people might know, I was chosen by a majority of the council after 8 rounds of voting to finish out the rest of the unexpired term that Councilmember Clendenin left over when he resigned at the end of December. So we were there kind of a couple months through January, February, and March, most of March, I think, without representation in District 3. So I'm glad we have representation in District 3 now. I'm excited to really get the ball rolling again for District 3. As a lot of people know, District 3 is kind of a unique district. We have all time, from socioeconomic levels, we have low all the way up to high, and it's from racial diversity. We have probably, I think, the most diverse, racially diverse district in the entire city too. So it's going to be a challenge to represent everybody, but I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. One of the first goals that I have tried to lay out is diversifying my district advisory board. I think I've done a little bit of that. We're making strides in that in the district advisory board. I just had my first DAB meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we have a full DAB for the first time in, I think, 6 or 8 months. We had between 2 and 3 vacancies for quite a while. So I was pretty proud for my first DAB to get it filled up completely and represented. And I have 3 new DAB members in Joseph Shepard, Jessica Lucas, and Emily Fogg. So I'm anxious to hear their input, and of course get the input from the people who have been on the DAB for quite a while as well. And I myself, I was on the district advisory board for District 3 for about 3 years up until my appointment on the council. So I've been very involved in District 3. One of my top priorities is Clapp Park. I really want to get the ball rolling on finalizing the master plan for Clapp Park, which is going to come up here probably within the next couple of months. I think the Parks Director, Troy Houtman, told me that plan is going to come before us in June, I think. Cindy, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's going to be coming up here pretty soon. So I'm very excited about the Clapp Park plan, and the master plan that we've been working on is looking absolutely fantastic. So we can have an amenity in District 3 to attract people from all over the country to come to Wichita. It's going to be a very big plan, and I'm very excited about that. So I was also a member of the Transit Advisory Board for about a year up until my appointment on the council. I'm very passionate about public transit and how Wichita approaches public transit. And to be quite honest with you, I think it's going to be a tough sell out there, but I think Wichita needs to have a mindset change in how we attack public transit. I think truly one of the things that really holds us back in becoming an Atlanta or a Denver or a St. Louis is the way we think about public transit. I realize it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to happen very quickly, but we have to start somewhere. We have to take baby steps in changing our mindset and really approaching public transit in a different way in this city. So I'm excited to get those talks going and talks about everything. I'm truly excited about District 3 and the city of Wichita as a whole. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I grew up in far South Wichita. When I say I'm from South Wichita, I am from South Wichita. I am so far south. I am in between Derby and Hayesville. I grew up at 55th and Broadway, so we were so far south. I grew up in Hayesville School District, so I went to Hayesville schools all my life. I'm a proud graduate of Campus High School. And when I bought my first house in 1998, I moved just a mile away from my boyhood home. So I live near 63rd and Hydraulic now. And I've lived here since, 1998. plan to be here for the rest of my life. If hopefully, we'll see. Unless someone wants to buy me a plane ticket to Belize or something, maybe I might stay out there. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But that's a little about me. Thank you for the opportunity, Cindy.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Congratulations on filling your DAB board. I know that's a time-consuming but
Yes.
really important part of what we do to make sure that we get all voices from across our district. So thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Cirillo while we have him here? All right. Well, I'm gonna introduce Sally Stang. Sally is the Director of Housing and Community Services for the City of Wichita. Sally came to us from Tucson, Arizona, right, Sally? Yes, came to us and has just a wealth of experience and expertise in this area. We are very fortunate to have her. She's worked on lots of projects. She's been with us a little over a year now, I think, maybe a year and a couple months, and has done just some really innovative things. And so rather than me talk anymore, I'm going to turn over to Sally and let her talk about some of the things that we've got going on in the city. And I know she'll talk about WeWrap, which is what folks are on for. So anyway, and RAD. So Sally, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's always great to be able to get out and talk about the wonderful work that we do in the Housing and Community Services Department. And most people don't really know everything that we do. Even in City Hall, I'll run into somebody from finance or parks and they're like, we didn't know you did that. And I'm like, yeah, we do that. Send people our way. We've got some great programs going on. So I was asked to give just an overall overview of the department and the programs that we run, and then to talk about 3 specific programs, and then I can answer any questions about any program that we do. I have put together a PowerPoint just to kind of guide me along the way so I don't miss telling you something. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you right now, okay? So, and please somebody confirm that you're able to see my screen.
Yep, we can see it, Sally.
Perfect. All right. So the Housing and Community Services Department, obviously, we do a myriad of programs. We joke about providing programs from diapers to diapers because, from babies to seniors, everything in between. And our goal is to stabilize neighborhoods by administering various affordable housing programs and providing well-being services to help residents break the cycle of poverty. So we have lots of goals, and I'm not going to read the whole time. It drives me crazy when we read PowerPoints, but increasing and preserving affordable housing, reducing urban blight, building coalitions and partnerships, which is one of my favorite things to do, market housing programs to increase opportunities for low and moderate income residents, and increase the number of participants in our programs that are able to attain self-sufficiency. So those are some of our major goals that are really an umbrella to all of the different programs and divisions that we have. And so we do have 4 major divisions outside of administration, of course, within the department, and they're all funded in unique ways. So our division in our department is actually the Wichita-Sedgwick County Community Action Partnership, which receives federal funding, community service block grant funding that comes from the Department of Health and Human Services and flows to us through the state of Kansas, and is really designed to create programs and opportunities to break the cycle of poverty. We have the Wichita Housing Authority, which in most communities is a separate legal entity, but in about 5% of the case, the Housing Authority sits within local government, and we are one of those. Although called the Wichita Housing Authority, our jurisdiction actually spans all of Sedgwick County, all of Butler County, and all of Harvey County outside the city of Newton. So we are really a regional housing authority funded through the HUD and the Office of Public and Indian Housing. And the 2 major program activities that happen within the Housing Authority are the Public Housing Program and the Housing Choice Voucher Program and all of its sub-programs. So that is our largest division. It's about $18 million of our budget comes from Public and Indian Housing to operate the Wichita Housing Authority. The Housing First program is the only area in which we receive any local funding. So Housing First is a really forward-thinking, especially when it was created back in 2008, initiative between Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita in order to try and address chronic homelessness in the community. And it's funded with just under $200,000 from each the city and the county. And it provides rent assistance, utility assistance, and case management for people who are chronically homeless, meaning they've experienced more than a year of homelessness and have a disabling condition. And then the last division is what we call the Community Investments Division. And it is funded from also from HUD, but it's the Office of Community Development. And it includes Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnership Program, and the Emergency Solutions Grants funding. So 98% of the funding that comes through the department is federal funding. And of course, you know, like I said, it's not even all coming from the same area. So they all have separate rules and regulations on the use, reporting, planning periods. So we are always either in a planning stage or a reporting stage of some branch of the department. So what I call our ordinary housing and community service department programs are the things that we do every day, every year. They're part of the normal scheme of activities. And that is, like I said, the public housing and Section 8 programs, which have mainstream vouchers, which are for persons with disabilities who are not elderly, who we're trying to keep from having to go into assisted living or nursing care due to their disability. We have the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing vouchers that are for homeless veterans. We have foster youth to independence vouchers for foster youth, who've aged out of the foster system. So, I mean, there's just a myriad of different programs that fall within the voucher program, family self-sufficiency, home ownership, all kinds of things going on. We also, out of community investments, we do a lot of homeowner repair and rehab, and we have different models for that. We have a grant program for minor repairs. We have a low interest loan payment. We have a program that actually uses a bank financing to finance repairs, but then we buy down the interest rate. So we have a lot of different opportunities for homeowners who may need resources in repairing their homes. We have a rental rehabilitation program for landlords who need repairs in their homes that they rent to low or moderate income residents. We have historic rehabilitation for historic buildings, down payment assistance. We do a lot of infill, infill single family development with our partners like Habitat for Humanity and Mennonite Housing, Power CDC, Jacob's Ladder, building new quality, affordable single family homes for first time home buyers generally. We do infrastructure funding for CDBG eligible neighborhoods. So neighborhoods that have a 51% or more are below the poverty rate or the area median income. We can do things, we've done things like stormwater projects, street paving, sidewalks, things like that. We have out of the WISCAP office, the Wichita Sedgwick County Community Action Project, we do individual family and development programs, which is individualized casework with families who are looking to improve their education and job situations. And then we can provide job training assistance with that too. So we can pay for people to go get their CDL or get many different types of, we see a lot of people going into medical training, CNAs. We're able to provide assistance for people to be able to complete that. We love the CHAMP Summer Youth Meal Program. That's something we got involved in and are funding year after year now through the Kansas Department of Education to be able to provide after school meals and summer meals. 2020 was a rough year for that program because many of the places where we had meal sites were closed down due to COVID. So we do look to pick that up again and pick up more feeding sites for this next summer. The Way to Work program, fabulous program where we provide job training for 14 to 17-year-olds. It's 2 days a week and then 3 days a week. Generally, they are placed in jobs with nonprofits, government entities, and other businesses to get hands-on experience working and feedback on how that's working out. That's something we've been doing for many years. We've received 225 applications this year, which is we're absolutely thrilled about. And then we are also seeking additional job placement areas, which is a great partnership for our community. We're able to provide them workers for 8 weeks this summer where we are paying the wage. So we provide the wage subsidy and they provide that on-the-job training. Fabulous, fabulous program. And then, of course, we provide funding to other nonprofits in the community, dozens of them, but for domestic violence shelter services, youth enrichment and crime prevention, medical care and pharmacy services, things like that. So, money flows through us to fund different programs with our nonprofit partners. And then recently we launched the facade program as kind of an offshoot to infrastructure in low-income neighborhoods to be able to provide facade. And this one is actually open for applications at the moment. It's for facade repairs and improvements in low-income neighborhoods for businesses that serve low-income residents. And so we are able to help with anything that's forward-facing signage and roof lines and gutters, and we just can't do landscaping and parking, unfortunately, under that program. But so we have that's the normal kind of activities that happen with us. But it's been a kind of an abnormal year, I'll tell you that. And then we are always seeking other opportunities too. So we are currently in the middle of a lead hazard control grant they're very competitive national grants. We received just over $1.6 million to address lead paint issues in pre-1978 homes that have children under 6 that either reside or visit frequently. That's a 3-year grant program that is currently going on. And then last year, we applied for a Department of Justice, they've changed the name again, on this community-based crime reduction grant. So I got CBCR in my head for like 9 months, and now they've renamed it the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Grant. And we received $1 million for community initiatives to try and reduce crime in one of the highest crime areas in the city, which happens to a lot of it falls into District 6. And our target area is from Waco to Washington, Murdoch to Kellogg. And we're really just gonna start initiating that grant. So we've got our grant coordinator who's on board now and gonna start the planning phase of that grant. This one was interesting. I really didn't think we were gonna get funded. It was really kind of not your normal Department of Justice grant related to crime. And we were proposing bringing in social workers to work side by side with law enforcement in the target area to try and reduce where we saw a lot of crime against and by homeless individuals. And so it was a really kind of a outside the box thought. And so when we got funded, I was just floored that we actually received this grant. We're very excited to get that one rolling. So those were ones we actually went out and sought. Next week, we're bringing to council to get authorization to submit for a grant for it's called the Older Adult Home Modification Program. And it is $1.25 million over 3 years for us to be able to go in hire an occupational therapist to work with older adults to determine what type of modifications would be needed to make sure they can age in place. So we're talking grab bars, railings, ramps, things like that, so that people can age in place and not necessarily have to move from their homes. So we're very excited about that. Obviously, it's a very competitive grant application. Next week is just getting authorization to submit, and we will cross our fingers that we'll be able to obtain that one. But last year, like I said, was crazy, right? COVID-19, we received quite a bit of funding from HUD in particular, some from Department of Health and Human Services for additional programs to help us address COVID-19. And with that funding, here's a whole list of activities that we initiated with that funding. So some of it, although the Wichita Emergency Rental Assistance Program is through the Department of Treasury, we created a landlord incentive program in the voucher program. We've brought in social work interns from Newman and WSU that are working side by side with the homeless outreach team. and trying to move as many people from homelessness into housing that we can, and utilize those resources. We've provided the neighborhood resource centers funding for the hotspot program for outreach and masks that they were distributing at those neighborhood resource centers. The Finding Your Way Home program, that's something else through Wichita Police Department, where when somebody who's been engaged with a homeless system, when we can try and engage them with family members inside or outside the city and try and reconnect them for that support and place to live. We have homeless caseworkers that are working with the homeless preference vouchers, again, to try and get as many people housed. We are working with United Way on a hotel motel voucher program for those who are experiencing homelessness that were either symptomatic of COVID-19 or were tested and awaiting results. We did a year of food boxes to seniors in public housing. We've provided internet, made available Cox Connect to Compete internet service for families in public housing in the voucher program who have children, school-aged children, so that they could remote learn. All kinds of things going on. And then one of our biggies is the 316 Hotel Studios at Humankind, which we are able to tackle because of this additional funding. And I'm going to go into details on that particular program. We've just done a myriad of new programs because of the new funding. So it has been a wildly crazy year for us, I'll tell you. But it's great to be able to put this money to use in our community. I was asked to speak about how housing supports the neighborhood resource centers. And so we use community development block grant funds, particularly in the public service category. And we provide funding, $385,000 a year for the operations of the 3 neighborhood resource centers. And one of the criteria of being able to use community development block grant funds is those services have to be situated in an area where they'll be providing service to low to moderate income neighborhoods. And so the goals are to be a resource for those people who live in those neighborhoods, and to help them identify resources to improve their circumstances, to enhance their quality of life, especially for special populations, build capacity, improve the health of the neighborhood and conditions in general, deal with any type of blight. That's why you see a lot of neighborhood cleanup activities that happen, and to help promote self-sufficiency. So that's the goals of the program and why it's funded year after year. But also in 2020 and 2021, because of the additional CARES funding that we received, we provided additional money outside the normal operations money, specifically to expand the hotspot internet program, knowing people were stuck at home and not everybody had internet service, to be able to provide the funding for more hotspots to be made available at each of those centers, to provide outreach, so for mailings and information and that sort of things to be able to go out from the neighborhood resource centers about programs and other resources. And then we provided the funding that purchased all the masks that were given away. I mentioned that before. And then we provided an additional almost $25,000 to the centers because during the City Hall shut down, and even now when we're not shut down, an opportunity for public housing or voucher clients to be able to drop their paperwork off at any of the resource centers, and they assist people in either completing that paperwork, and then they're able to scan and send it over to the caseworkers at City Hall. So it saves people from having to come downtown to drop off their paperwork. The 3 locations are at Atwater, Colvin, and Evergreen. Those are where those 3 neighborhood resource centers are located. So this is one program. Like I said, it happens year after year and is funded in support of neighborhoods, but it got a little boost of funding this year to provide expanded services at those locations. The next project is the 316 Hotel, the Studios at Humankind, and this one was a biggie for us. It was really a collaboration. It was having to bring a lot of people together to solve both a short-term problem and try to create a long-term solution related to homelessness. So we were very excited. This one was really a challenge to get approved and moved forward. So the 316 hotels are located at 1011 North Topeka Avenue. The property itself, the ground underneath the property, is owned by Ascension Via Christi. Even when it was operating as a hotel, it was under a ground lease with the previous hotel owner, which was this LLC over here. But Via Christi actually controlled the ground. So another reason, another organization we needed to collaborate with. And you can see the location here on the map, you know, Broadway and Topeka, 9th Street, 10th Street, give you an idea. So we're right there, right by Via Christi Hospital, which explains why they own the property. So the vision of the project was to be able to acquire the hotel, which was on the market, was not doing well financially for years, and be able to use it as a 24-hour overflow shelter, because we knew with COVID-19, traditional homeless shelters were inadequate. They could not handle distancing. If you think about it, I mean, people are generally in bunk beds right next to each other or laying on mats on floors. We knew we were going to need to expand shelter space for the winter because of COVID-19. But rather than, many communities took the tack, rather than purchasing or, you know, taking a big step, did more motel vouchers and just placed, if you look across the country, many, many cities were just paying for rooms in order to decongregate. But we thought, wow, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We have this CARES funding that came in at the time. So to give you some perspective, the department only receives about $250,000 a year in emergency solutions grants, which is the funding specific to address homelessness. $250,000 a year. Well, under CARES that we received $3.3 million. So they knew very seriously something needed to be done related to homelessness and the spread of COVID-19. And so when we looked at that, we said, you know, yes, we do recognize we need to decongregate. We need to be able to provide more space, but we want to be able to come up with a long-term solution too. So the idea of, you know, acquire the hotel, use it for, to help decongregate shelter, but then be able to convert it into permanent supportive housing, specifically for those who are coming out of homelessness. By creating these small studio apartments, and when I say small, there's about 300 square feet, and being able to provide it in a way so that it can have consistent on-site case management, so that people receive the services that they need in a safe environment. So we took the idea to the homeless service providers, said, we have some funding, we believe we can, you know, acquire this building. I was a little bit stunned, but Humankind Ministries was the only one to step forward and say, yeah, let's take a look at this and see if we can make it work. And in the end, we did. We were able to make it work. So the project, like I said, is current, and it opened on January 11th as the expanded women's shelter. Little different shelters than typical homeless shelters. That was one of my absolutes. I did not want to see it like a typical homeless shelter where people come in at 7 o'clock at night and are kicked out at 7 o'clock in the morning and wander the neighborhoods with all their belongings. I'm not a fan of that model at all. I believe people need to feel safe, have a safe place, a place where people can come and caseworkers can work with people, can help them try and find jobs, help them try and find housing and other resources that they need. And so that was an absolute in my book, that this had to be a 24-hour shelter when it was operating as a shelter. And then right now, as it is operating as a shelter, the plans are underway. We're getting ready to bid the construction for the rehabilitation of the second and third floor to start those hotel rooms into small studio apartments, excuse me. So the project funding, the acquisition cost for the hotel was about $2.6 million. And then there's about 10,000. It was actually about 8,000 and change for closing costs. The city provided $2 million in project funds, and we used $610,000 in CDBG CARES funding for the acquisition. Ascension Via Christi, we had to go to their board and convince them that, you know, this change of use from a hotel to temporary use as 24-hour shelter and then permanent supportive housing was a good thing. And they they backed our project, which was fabulous, and they've amended their ground lease to allow this use and provided a 40-year ground lease at $1 a year, renewable for another 40 years, which is great. And then we've provided shelter operation funding from Emergency Solutions Grant CARES funding so that they could operate that 6 months as that women's overflow shelter. And then we're providing $1.6 million towards the rehabilitation. And it's a significant, and it's needed to be a significant rehabilitation, including the installation of the kitchenettes. I mean, but they're doing HVAC replacements, electrical upgrades, security systems, plumbing, signage, landscaping, the whole 9 yards. And so of the 1.6 million in rehab, we're providing 1.4 million, and 200,000 is coming from private donations. So we're very excited. The construction should be starting very soon. I know they've been cleaning out the furnishings and other items on the second and third floors, and have been obtaining bids for the work. So it is moving along. But the overall strategy with this was, how do we create that long-term asset that's viable, that creates the safe space, the quality, safe, affordable housing, but also allows for humankind to be able to have on-site wraparound services and case management, and can fund it. And so by providing the voucher subsidy, project-based voucher subsidy, they will be able to earn $600 a month in rent for those units, because they'll be fully furnished with on-site services. That funding for the rent should cover all of their property management, maintenance, and case management needs. They're about $33,000 short in year 1 and 2. And we know that, so we're providing them actually $66,000 in operations reserves for years 1 and 2, and need to make adjustments to the budget to cover that in years 3 and beyond. The area we believe they can make that change is in the security patrol. Not that we don't want the security patrol so that there's someone on site 24/7, but we quoted this by using a security firm at $25 an hour, where they could actually hire security patrols at a lesser cost and cover their gap. So we do believe that this will be financially viable come year 3. So we're very excited. And the fact that they have no debt service, because we were able to purchase the funds with the CARES funding and the city funding, is what makes the fact that they can provide on-site case management. If they had debt service, they wouldn't be able to provide those services. So that kind of wraps up the 316 hotel. We're very excited about it. I kind of laughed because we went back and forth on this project and what funding could we use. And I'll be honest, HUD and Congress threw the CARES money out very quickly. They thought the idea of doing this was great, but the way the regulations were written and the way the legislation was written, some of what we were going to do, if we used all ESG fundings, would have triggered repayment when they converted to permanent housing. I laugh now because under the American Rescue Plan Act, they actually have a bucket of money specifically for this design, to acquire a property, use it temporarily as shelter, and then convert it to permanent supportive housing. So it was like, I almost felt like they listened and understood that this was a very good model to follow, because it solves both a short-term problem and a long-term problem. So the last project that I want to talk about was the Wichita Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is my whole life anymore, I'll be honest with you. We wrap. It came to us from the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, signed by President Trump, December 27th. It provides $25 billion across the country for emergency rental assistance, and a $200 million minimum allocation per state based on population. So you can imagine Kansas got $200 million. Direct allocations were made available to local governments with populations over $200,000. We received, and I'll never forget this number, $12,046,519.50. And it is administered by the Department of Treasury. So this was kind of interesting, because Treasury has not ever done any type of housing activity that I'm aware of in the past. So they admit in their calls they're challenged just as much as we are. They're having conversations with HUD on best practices and other ideas and options for the program. So in order to qualify for assistance, a household has to have income less than 80% of the area median income. And I've provided at the bottom here a little chart that shows you, and that's based on the number of people in the family. And it's pretty significant. I mean, for a family of 4, have to make under $58,100. Although right in the legislation, it states we must first serve households with income less than 50% of the area median income, and households that have been unemployed for the full 90 days prior to application. So even though people, you know, at the 80% area median income qualify for the program, we have to serve everybody else who's under 50% AMI or been unemployed for 90 days prior to those who are between 50 and 80% AMI. The household has to be housing unstable, which means that they have rental arrears or an eviction notice, and they have to have a COVID-related economic impact. Sounds simple. It's not near as simple as even we would have thought. Program benefits, we can provide rental and utility arrears. We can provide future rent and utility payments in 3-month increments with recertification every 90 days. Right now we can provide a total of 12 months worth of assistance, and that includes all back months plus forward months. So that adds to the complication too. And then that's what makes this program very different than everything else. So everything else we've seen, KEP through the state, the EAP program, what Center of Hope and Salvation Army do is always focused just on the arrears, where this program allows us to get people caught up on those arrears and then give them some stability going forward. Because no matter what time of the month we get someone caught up on arrears, guess what? Rent is right around the corner. It's not that far away, rent's due again. So this is really a game-changing program. There is a prohibition on duplicative subsidy, which means we have to screen for that people, if they've received subsidy through KEP, CARA, ESG, Center of Hope, Salvation Army, adds to the challenges, I'll be honest with you. Income verification methods, right in the legislation, gives us 2 options for verifying household income. It can be based on the 2020 income. We need a copy, must supply their complete signed IRS 1040 form with all the supporting documents to qualify using that method. Or we can base it on income verification for the last 60 days, but it means verifying every type of income for every household member for the last 60 days. Not as easy as it sounds. We have screened the first 800 people who've applied, and not one has provided all of the information. Yeah. As much as we try and communicate, this is what we need, it's not what we get. They also have to have a COVID-related economic impact, and we have to document that. It can be documented through unemployment, it can be documented from a termination letter from the employer, but it has to state that it's COVID-related. It can be a letter from the employer regarding reduced hours. They can provide sufficient check stubs for us to see that it was reduced, their hours were reduced, but we still need something from the employer saying they were reduced because of COVID-19. We need remote school documentation coupled with increased childcare costs, because that can be a COVID-related economic impact. They can provide medical bills for a COVID-related illness. And then it's other documents, because we can't pretend to know right now every type of economic impact that someone could have experienced due to COVID. So it is handled on a case-by-case basis, what they're claiming is their COVID impact, and then we have to determine what type of documentation is necessary in order to fulfill the obligation that we've verified a COVID-related impact. The other documents that we need are a copy of the lease, all pages. There are things we can do if there's not a lease. It's much more complicated because we have to show that there is a contractual relation, that payments have been made, utilities are in the name. You know, it's not as easy when we don't have a lease. When we do have a lease, much easier, but we do need all pages, because sometimes it is amazing where you'll find, here's the rent plus this fee is on page 3. Well, in order for us to pay the rent plus this fee, we have to be able to document it. Copy of the rent demand or eviction notice. So copy of the notice the landlord sent saying, hey, this is past due, or a 3-day notice for eviction. Copies of the utility bills, because we're able to get people caught up, but it's only for months, it's a certain amount of months. That's where a lot of people think, oh, they're just going to pay my $3,000 in arrears that I've been carrying for 8 years. It's not how the program works. If we're providing assistance for January, February, March, we can only pay the amounts of the utility bills that were billed for January, February, and March. Okay. We need identification. We need to be able to verify that the person who applied is the person on the lease, is the person who we're providing assistance to. And we need the contact information for the landlord. That one amazes me, the percentage of applications that don't even know their landlord name, number, or email, or are just not providing it to us. Common application issues, income documentation, some of the issues we find, unsigned tax forms, the amounts on the tax forms don't match the W-2s and 1099s. The information documentation doesn't match information on the bank statements. I get a zero income certification, but I look at your bank statement and you've had $3,000 worth of deposits in the last month. Those are all issues. Income documentation doesn't cover the full 60 days. You've given me 2 check stubs out of, possibly 9 weeks in 60 days, right? 9. Issues with the lease, the family composition on the lease doesn't match the application. You're applying for assistance for a family of 4, but your lease says only 2 people live there, or you're applying for, yourself and your children, but your lease says there's another adult in the household. That happens 50% of the time on the applications we're seeing. And not all pages of the lease are submitted. Common landlord issues, the name provided as a landlord does not match the ownership with the Sedgwick County Assessor's Office. The tenant does not provide the landlord's contact information. The landlord doesn't respond to requests for information or to sign up or establish as a vendor. Then there's weird scenarios where the property's in a family trust and a family member lives in the unit. And so we have to determine whether there's ownership there. So if there's ownership there, it doesn't qualify. All kinds of weird situations. People who claim somebody else filled out their application or on the lease, but don't actually live there. A lot of that. COVID-19 economic impact issues. The employer letter doesn't indicate the termination was or reduced hours was due to COVID-19, or the check stubs don't demonstrate a reduction in hours or pay. Those are kind of common things that happen. So that's where we stand right now. The program is a challenge, and we're reading more and more about that and communicating more with other providers across the country. We did have a conference call with the Department of Treasury about 2 weeks now. I think it was 2 weeks ago yesterday, and there were over 1,000 grantees on the call. And through polling of the people on the call, it was determined that less than 50% of the grantees had even started taking applications, and less than 20% had started issuing payments yet. As much as it sounds like a simple program to administer, it's not. We absolutely, and it's open for fraud like you wouldn't believe. And we do have investigations ongoing now for cases where we believe that there is fraud going on. So those are things that we don't want a repeat of what happened with the state and unemployment benefits and fraud happening. We have to do our due diligence to make sure and try and make sure as best we can that it doesn't. So that wraps up my PowerPoint, and I am open for any questions that you may have.
Hey, Sally, there were a couple in the chat, so I'm going to start with those, and I know other people have questions specific. So one you answered about the facade program, and it's different than the city's economic development facade program. So
it is, and actually just to expand on that, part of the reason we put it together was specifically because we saw so many businesses weren't eligible for the city's program because their property didn't abut the right of way. And if you look in downtown areas, oftentimes the properties do abut the right of way, but you get off into neighborhoods and the typical business you'll have the building and then a parking lot in front. And that alone disqualifies it from the economic development facade program. And so we said, you know what, we need to come up with something that can help businesses that just don't qualify for the other one.
Yeah, And then the second question is, are the historic rehab, is that tax credits or more than just tax credits?
It's more than tax credits. We can actually use home funds or CDBG funds. It is separate from historic tax credits. It's more similar to homeowner rehab, but with the historic twist, to be honest with you. As we know, once you touch a historic building, it gets that much more complicated. You're getting the state historic preservation officer involved, but there is funding. And this could be used as gap funding, particularly if someone is using historic tax credits, can often provide you up to 40% of a rehab on a historic building. Well, that still leaves more money that's needed. And so it's not something that people tap into very often because we don't have a lot of low income, because you have to be low income folks with a historic building that are taking on the effort. But if they do, there's a resource.
Yeah, all right, good. All right, how about questions from the group? Pat, did you have a question? Or Pam, I know that two of you at the beginning said you were interested in things. Oh, Pat,
Somebody's muted.
You're muted. You're still muted.
I'm sorry.
There you go. There you go.
I'm sorry. Can I go ahead or is Pam going to speak?
No, go ahead.
All right. Sally, I have a couple of questions. How many applications have gone through from start to finish since you opened this?
300, about 300. Now, start to finish doesn't necessarily mean they were approved. So we've had a lot of people apply who don't qualify. They're either not renters, they don't live in the city of Wichita, they don't have rental arrears, they can't prove, they don't have a COVID related impact. So start to finish for us is to start to determine if they're eligible. If eligible, provide funding. If not eligible, notify that they're not eligible. So.
All right, then let me rephrase that. How many have gone from start to receiving funding?
Just under 200 have received funding and we've keyed up over $800,000 in funding already.
Okay, and how many applications have you had?
3,100.
3,100, and out of those, how many were complete?
None.
Okay. Do you think that possibly people do not know what you expect of them? Is there a list that's sent out?
Yes.
Something that they get? And I know that in my case, my home is occupied by a relative, so I am well aware of what is going on here. And she has been asked to provide some things that she cannot provide because they don't exist.
Okay.
And
can you give me an example of that?
Proof of unemployment without the extra money that is provided by the U.S. government. Because
we just ask for proof of the unemployment. Then we weed through what's included and what's not included in their annual income calculation.
And are you aware that the unemployment office has changed their website and that is not available to them anymore? They can only go back
we are getting it from some people, and some of that has to do with whether they're on the PUA. It really depends on which type of unemployment that they're receiving. They're receiving the pandemic additional assistance. There's 4 different types. Some are getting better information than others, but most are able to prove. So if it's been cut off or they're receiving it, we're verifying it through bank statements. So if you were receiving it and it stops, we can see that on the bank statement. If you are receiving it now, we can see that we take the screenshot that they get and we compare that to what's either happening or not happening within the bank statement.
Okay, and department wise, I understand you have a lot on your plate. However, I have received an email yesterday, a copy of an email where my tenant was informed that I had not submitted all of the required paperwork, yet the day after I submitted it, I got notification from another member of your department that they had gotten it.
Okay.
Okay, so
They're making it, okay.
obviously the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing in some instances. And I understand this is a large program. I've worked with large programs. However, this is an emergency rental assistance program. And right now we are coming right up on the 1st of May.
Mhm.
And there are people who have not received any help and feel that they're getting the runaround.
Well, I can guarantee you they're not getting the runaround because people feel they're getting the runaround when we say we need more. We're required to verify. That's federally required. As far as they've given us until September 30th, 2022, they expect it's going to take time to get this money on the street, this $12 million. And at the rate we're going now, will be expended before the end of this year. So we do understand, we absolutely understand the plight of the landlord. We do. And we're trying to work as well with them as we can to be able to get them the information or get them paid when we can. But when we can't, it's not simply because we don't want to, it's because we can't. And it is it's taking longer than I would have ever thought on each application. And we are very challenged. Even though we're going through a temp agency, the temp agency gets applications. Last week, they got 26 applications, only one person showed up for the interviews. So trying to get bodies in the seats to be able to provide more capacity to process applications faster is a challenge. And we're using the temp agency simply because it's much, much faster than going and trying to hire through human resources. And these are temporary positions that will peel off as demand diminishes. We have tremendous demand right now. We've got 12 staff working on it, 6 temps and 6 staff. I've pulled off other projects to try and get this thing going. We've asked for 9 additional temps. It took them 3 weeks longer than we'd hoped, but we have 3 coming in on Monday. So we continue to work through it. But money is flowing, and it's flowing faster and faster each week as people get used to the process and are submitting things. And oftentimes what's happening especially with landlords is once they get their first one keyed up, then other ones are a little bit easier because they're already established as a landlord.
Okay, thank you for your time.
No problem. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Is that your only rental property is the one?
Yes, yes.
Hey, Sally, I think Pam has a question about our renovation of our senior public housing. So Pam, you're on.
Thank you, Cindy. So I know of a relative who lives in Greenway Manor, and they were slated to start renovations or hear something about renovations in late December or late 2019, and then that got delayed. And then the last I heard was that the funding had been lost. And then I believe it was earlier this year, there was a water leak in the building, and there was some talk about being black mold in the building, but residents are still living in the building, and there's no updates on what's going on in the building. So wondering if you can help me.
Sure. Yes, there was a water leak. We did have, it was an awful scenario. We had a burst pipe and that cold snap happened on the 3rd floor laundry room, infiltrated the electrical system, and we lost power to the whole building and had to vacate residents for almost a week. Really kind of crazy. No black mold has been found. It's been inspected and tested.
Okay.
It was, and of course, to have to relocate seniors in that bitter cold, it's just like, oh my gosh. And I can't give transit more of a kudos. They really stepped up. We made one phone call, said we need help. They provided buses and paratransit buses and got our folks not only moved to the hotel, but got them moved back too. So they were fabulous. ROD has been a challenge from the get-go. When I first got here in 19, it was completely stalled. I know the concept started in 17, was approved for application, it's been, good news. Yesterday, we hand-delivered notices of a resident meeting that's going to occur on Thursday.
Okay.
So this is a crucial step. So we have a call on Monday with HUD. It's a concept call. This is pretty much like their final blessing for us to move closing forward. So we're very excited about that. So that happens on Monday. We couldn't schedule the tenant meeting till after the concept call. We have the tenant meeting, and then we're able to submit all of the final documents. So we're very, Tuesday, we have the bond, intent for the bonds that are associated with this project. I can tell you I'm on a call with at least 20 lawyers at least twice a week on this project. So it is finally moving, yay. It's been really challenging. I mean, different things going on that caused some of those challenges. And then, you know, at the end of 2020, one of the things that we got hit with is the incredible increase in construction costs. Now, all of a sudden we had gotten our funding together that, you know, we had been trying, we'd lost our investor partner and all of that. And then all of a sudden we didn't have enough money for the work that needed to be done. And we didn't want to shortchange the job. And so we were finagling and finessing, and we actually changed general contractors, and we're able to leverage a contract with that general contractor who's currently working on Shady Way in Somerset, and being able to leverage their supply contracts to keep those costs down, which was great. Nice. We were like, yay. And then that same legislation signed by President Trump had a bit of extra benefit in there, and that it created a permanent, for what they call 4% floor on the tax credits, which provided additional equity funding for the project. So we're able to move things forward. So we are very excited right now. We're scheduled to close in July, end of July of this year. The way that project now is going to work is they're going to immediately start construction on the vacant units at the 2 garden apartments, Rosa Gregg and Bernice Hutcherson. Those are going to be done in 3 phases so that nobody has to temporarily relocate. They will relocate once from an unrehabbed unit to a rehab unit.
Okay.
Now the high rises are a different story. Once we close in July, all of the residents at McLean Manor that remain, I guess the one benefit of this taking so long is we have a lot of vacant units. As people have moved out, we've not been allowed to refill them. We're going to take all of the occupied units, people that are occupying units at McLean, and move them into Greenway because we have enough vacant units there. They're going to do 10 months of construction on McLean. Then they're going to move those residents back, the McLean residents. Offer up to any remaining Greenway residents if they want to move either to a vacant garden apartment or McLean, they can. And we, at our cost, move them there. Otherwise, they will be moved temporarily into temporary housing for 10 months while the construction happens on Greenway. So we won't be done with Greenway until the middle of 23.
Okay.
Yeah. But all of the relocation costs, and then we have a relocation coordinator that works with each individual household. That's all borne on the project. We're paying for all of that. It is a challenge. We tried to get HUD to allow us to start relocating residents from McLean over to Greenway before we close, and they said we were not allowed to do that, even though we had residents wanting to. They're like, I just want to get it over with, you know, let me go over there now. And HUD came back and said no. So we're going to have some chaos in trying to get those residents all moved during the same 3-week period right after we close. So we're really excited that it's moving forward, finally.
Yeah, yes.
But it is a $34 million project, so there's going to be substantial. I mean, those units are going to be beautiful once they're done.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much for the update. That's great.
No problem.
Well, we are at the end of our time today. As you can see, Sally's department is very busy and very productive. Sally's brought lots of energy. I can attest to this. She's brought a lot of energy and a lot of innovation to housing and community services. As you look at the projects that housing and community services is working on, it's very different. The department looks very different than it did before Sally came. Just a couple of comments on the 316, the studios at Humankind. You all have heard me talk about this before, and this is a very fulfilling project to work on because it brings such a benefit to our community. As Sally said, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that we would not have without the funding that we got. And I believe that it is the beginning of the revitalization of North Broadway. You know, it's going to take time, but I do believe that that is the case. the Criminal Justice Innovation Grant. One thing that I want to mention, and former council member Janet Miller is on this call, and she'll appreciate this. So Sally said that she needed a program that people could learn about how to engage with municipal government. And I said, well, we have the Civic Engagement Academy. She goes, that's it, we're using that one. So that project has gone on to just become its own kind of life of its own and join other projects. So thanks, Janet, for that, for getting that started. And the WeWrap program, as you can see, it is an extremely challenging, but an extremely beneficial project. But the verification documentation, as we saw from Sally, is pretty tough because of the federal government rules. So Sally, I want to thank you for being with us today. You are, as always, a wealth of information, and I really appreciate that. And then just a couple of things, just in District 6 that I wanted to mention. I did make my appointment, District 6 appointment, to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Advisory Board this week. And some of you may know Renee Carrion, and Renee was our appointment to that advisory board, that inaugural advisory board. And there have been some questions about the places for people, particularly the zoning. And we, Anna and the planning department and I are working on a meeting for the neighborhood association presidents and representatives. So if you're interested in that, know that we are working on that meeting, and stay tuned.
Walt has his hand up.
And I think Walt had,
Up top left.
yeah, and I think Walt has, we'll finish up with a question from Walt. All right, Walt.
Unmute.
Oh, maybe he just had his, maybe he just
Well,
checked that.
He's up there. So
I know. All right.
Oh, wait a
Oh,
minute,
there he
unmuted
goes.
now.
Okay, Walt, your question?
Oh, okay, great. I was getting a question from my wife, so you have to compete, I guess. Sally and Cindy, I'm very interested in a couple of things. First off, is the city still disconnecting people for unpaid water bills?
No.
Do you know that for sure? Okay, because
I don't know it for sure. I don't know it for sure. I do know they delayed it specifically because the WeWrap funding was coming, and we have been working collaboratively. So that's the other piece of all this. We're working collaboratively with the utility providers to try and get people's payment histories and be able to get as much eligible funding to them to get those paid off.
And
well, that's what I'm reading between the lines here. We've got contractors being paid. We're buying buildings. 316 is being bought. A lot of renovations being done. A lot of people getting paid. Bureaucrats being hired. But only 200 people now, that's according to Sally, have actually qualified and received the assistance they needed for rent. So I know last time I checked with the water department, over $600 residents per month were being cut off. I don't know if that has stopped, if that's going to change, but it seems like a lot of money's flowing, but it's not necessarily getting to the people impacted by COVID or about to be evicted from their homes. What can we do about that?
Well, we're working on it, as you saw today, what Sally talked about. Last time I checked with staff, we weren't cutting off 600 people a month on water. I don't believe that is a correct number because I checked on that last time you asked me, Walt, and we are working with folks to ensure that they do not have their water shut off. Doesn't mean
well, but Sally says that they're waiting for people to qualify, and that's the problem with the unemployment insurance, that people call and they call and they call, they can't get through. People are desperate. We're going to have a flood of people once this moratorium on eviction stops. There are going to be thousands of people out of their homes here in Wichita. Yeah, well, I don't see that this system is working yet.
Well, that's what we're working on. That is certainly what Sally's department is working on.
And but if only 200 people are qualified, it seems to me the application process is too complex and people can't necessarily get through the maze.
Yeah, that's a federal government qualification process. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if I could add too, so the state CARA program has started. They're seeing the same. We're hearing the same slow, getting the money out the door from everyone. Last I had spoken, because we speak with state, because we have to check every applicant against what their programs are doing. They hadn't issued any money yet.
Yeah, yeah.
But I heard of hotspots getting 25,000. I'm hearing buying a building for 1.6 million. I'm hearing about contractors renovating one place, and then, you know, all these money are flowing. It's getting paid out to contractors and bureaucrats. I don't see the people that are hurting getting the benefits yet. That's what the taxpayers are putting their money on, is trying to help folks. How do we get this turned around?
Walt, every one of those projects that Sally talked about today were for the benefit of people. Every one of those, it's the people that are hurting. So there's no.
Well, eventually, but they're not yet. Only 200 have qualified.
No, you're talking about apples and oranges. When we talk about the Studios at Humankind, that is housing women who are homeless right now, and then helping people into 54 apartment buildings. The RAD project, or the renovation of the public housing, again, those are for the benefit of the people that live in that housing. So you can't lump all those programs together, I don't think, at least in my mind.
When are we going to get the people off the street in Topeka Boulevard and Broadway? Those folks are out there every day. How can we get them into shelters?
Yep, we are working on it.
Every day.
It's been going on for years.
It is. I wish it were an easy solution. I wish.
If it was an easy solution, I mean, nobody has come up with the magic solution that ends homelessness. We just continue to create programs that try to reduce it as much as possible.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to get involved with those programs if you're not, because
I have been for 10 years. We've had the same problem for 10 years. We had one commission after another. Jack Post was one of them, an attorney here in town, you know, Cindy, I believe. And he had a commission. Carl Brewer worked on it. I worked on it. Sam Meiskin worked on it. We had a whole bunch of people for 10, 15 years.
Yep.
And we still don't have shelter for people.
but some of the programs.
Let me butt here. So just so you know, every single step of that plan that Jack Post chaired was implemented, save one. And that is a housing trust fund, which would have been funded by development permit fees. And the development community's head exploded when there was any suggestion of any fee being added on to the processing of those permits, transfer fees, in order to fund that. That would have provided millions of dollars over time to fund programs. That was not approved. Everything else in that plan was implemented. I sat on that committee, went to 7 o'clock meetings for 2 or 3 years. And the city and the county came up with what you heard today, which was the Housing First program, which houses up to 60 some people every single year, rent free, with wraparound services. And what you're suggesting, you know, money for this, money for that, why is it not funding this? Those monies come from different silos from the federal government. You can't take money that funded the 316 program and fund the RERAP program. Doesn't work that way. So you can say those kinds of things, but they're not accurate statements, and they're very misleading to the public.
Well, let's talk about the budget itself. There was only $190,000 in the budget for homeless.
Okay.
And that budget is what, Cindy, what do we got, 900 million?
Yeah, so Walt, I think we're going to take this conversation offline. We are a little bit over time today. And so we're going to adjourn our meeting unless anybody else has just a last minute question that they want to ask. All right. Hey, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much, Sally. I know you had to condense a lot of information into 40 minutes. And so we really appreciate that. I hope people got at least a taste of what Housing and Community Services is doing. And we certainly can have Sally back sometime if we have specific questions for that. And so you all have a great Saturday, and we will see you at, we do have a DAB meeting, a mid-month DAB meeting. So if you're interested in that, it's this Wednesday, and then our next May 3rd is our next DAB meeting. So watch the newsletters, watch my video, watch the Facebook page for all the information. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.